Sort of thing where all the cool kids saw that film. It wasn't a gigantic hit, but if you wanted to go to a restaurant, you know, the girl at the restaurant, she'd seen the movie. Hello, Mr. Crowe, how you doing? You know, a nightclub or whatever. And
Tom Cruise has spent more than 4 decades convincing the world of one thing: control. Control over his image, control over his body, control over the stories told about him and the ones that never are. Every public smile looks measured. Every laugh lands right on cue. Every interview feels like it's been rehearsed, refined, and approved long before the camera ever rolled. He doesn't ramble, he doesn't misspeak, he doesn't hesitate. In an industry built on unpredictability, Tom Cruise represents precision. Hollywood thrives on chaos. Careers rise and fall overnight. Scandals derail legacies, egos clash. Yet Cruise has remained remarkably untouched. While others stumble publicly, he moves forward untouched, unwrinkled, unbroken. Audiences see the action hero, the man who runs toward danger, performs his own stunts, risks his life for spectacle. They see confidence, fearlessness, professionalism at its peak. But perfection maintained for this long stops feeling natural. It becomes strategic. And strategy always carries pressure, because no one stays this flawless without paying a private price. When every move is controlled, spontaneity disappears. When every image is protected, vulnerability becomes dangerous. And when vulnerability is avoided long enough, silence replaces honesty. What makes Tom Cruise fascinating isn't what we see on screen, it's what never makes it there. The pauses in interviews, the carefully avoided questions, the relationships that vanish without explanation, the stories that only surface years later, filtered through distance and discomfort. This isn't about questioning his success. His achievements are undeniable. This is about understanding the invisible cost of maintaining an image so airtight that nothing human is allowed to escape. From Top Gun onward, Tom Cruise didn't simply rise in Hollywood, he secured dominance. He wasn't chasing a moment, he was building permanence. While other actors experimented, disappeared, or reinvented themselves, Cruise chose something far more demanding: consistency through control. His career became a machine powered by discipline bordering on obsession. He trained longer than required, prepared harder than necessary, memorized details others delegated. Where many stars relied on teams, Cruise inserted himself into every layer of production. He didn't just act in films, he managed them. He shaped scripts, influenced casting, adjusted directors' visions to fit his own precision-driven approach. Over time, he became more than a performer, he became the system. Studios adapted around him, directors adjusted their methods, entire productions bent to accommodate his standards. And the results were undeniable: billion-dollar franchises, global admiration, and an image of unstoppable momentum. He became Hollywood's safest bet, not because he was unpredictable, but because he was exact. But discipline without flexibility hardens into rigidity. And rigidity, especially in creative spaces, creates friction. Collaboration becomes negotiation. Creativity becomes calculation. When one person's standards become non-negotiable, everyone else must either adopt or exit quietly. Cruise's iron grip on his career protected his legacy, but it also strained relationships, narrowed creative space, and slowly isolated him at the top. His success didn't come from letting go, it came from holding tighter than anyone else. And eventually, that grip would test not just his collaborators, but the personal connections closest to him. When actors meet, chemistry isn't automatic, especially when their creative philosophies move in opposite directions. Respect can exist without harmony, and when two powerful methods collide, tension doesn't explode, it simmers. Russell Crowe represents immersion. He disappears into character, surrendering ego, emotion, and comfort to reach truth. His process is internal, messy, unpredictable. Tom Cruise represents something else entirely: precision, rhythm, and momentum. His performances are engineered for pace. Energy is managed, emotion is controlled, not explored. Neither philosophy is wrong. Both have produced iconic performances, but when placed in the same space, they don't blend, they compete. On set, this difference wasn't theoretical, it was felt. Scenes slowed down as intentions were negotiated, direction turned into discussion. Crew members sensed the atmosphere shift, not hostile, but strained. Where one searched inward, Cruise pushed forward. Where one wanted space to explore, the other wanted efficiency. What should have been collaboration began to feel like quiet competition. Authority played a role. Cruise carried institutional power. His voice held weight beyond performance. And when authority is uneven, disagreement becomes delicate. You don't argue freely. You choose words carefully. You compromise before conflict ever reaches the surface. What audiences later praised as intensity on screen carried a different truth behind the camera. Discomfort shaped into professionalism. Respect never vanished, but harmony never arrived. And once creative friction settles into a pattern, it rarely resolves. It simply gets managed. That gap between admiration and alignment never fully closed. It lingered, unspoken, long after the camera stopped rolling. Hollywood friendships live under pressure. Fame magnifies loyalty, power complicates it, and divorce, especially public divorce, forces choices no one wants to make. When personal relationships fracture, neutrality becomes impossible. Silence becomes a statement. Presence becomes a position. In this case, loyalty wasn't strategic, it was emotional. Choosing to stand by a friend wasn't about industry politics, it was about history, trust, shared time away from cameras. But Hollywood doesn't reward emotional decisions, it rewards alignment. And choosing friendship over power often comes with consequences no one announces out loud. At first, the shift was subtle. Humor that no longer landed, invitations that quietly stopped coming, conversations that stayed polite but shallow. Over time, distance replaced familiarity. What once felt like mutual admiration hardened into something unresolved. Not open conflict, but something colder, something permanent. The industry noticed, even if it never spoke openly, because Hollywood operates on patterns. People watch who shows up, who doesn't, who stands where when things fall apart. Alliances don't need press releases, they announce themselves through absence. What makes these fractures lasting isn't anger, it's disappointment. Disappointment doesn't demand confrontation, it just withdraws. And once that withdrawal becomes habit, there's no easy way back, no apology big enough, no meeting casual enough. That line, once crossed, stayed crossed, not because of malice, but because loyalty, once tested publicly, can't be undone privately. And in an industry built on hierarchy, choosing humanity always leaves a mark. For most of his career, Tom Cruise's intensity stayed carefully contained, behind closed doors, inside production meetings, within systems he controlled. The public saw polish, not pressure. Then one interview changed everything. What was meant to promote a film became a cultural moment, not because of anger, but because of certainty. Absolute belief delivered without hesitation. No room for nuance, no acknowledgement of lived experience, no pause for complexity. That's what unsettled people. The discomfort didn't come from disagreement. Audiences expect differing opinions. It came from dismissal. Watching someone speak with total confidence about something they had never personally lived through created a visible disconnect. The tone wasn't curious, it wasn't open, it was final. And finality, especially on deeply personal issues, feels confrontational, even when delivered calmly. The reaction was swift, particularly from those who felt unseen, unheard, and spoken over. For the first time, the public didn't question his work ethic or talent. They questioned his judgment, his awareness, his ability to step outside his own certainty. That moment didn't destroy his career. It didn't end his dominance, but it fractured something important: the illusion of infallibility. Control, once admired, now felt intrusive. Confidence, once inspiring, felt rigid. And when perception shifts like that, it never fully resets. The audience doesn't turn away, but it watches differently, more carefully, more critically. That interview didn't expose a flaw, it exposed a boundary, a moment where control stepped into the spotlight and people realized how uncomfortable it could feel when certainty leaves no room for anyone else. Power on a film set is invisible until you feel it. It doesn't need to be announced, it moves through tone, timing, and expectation. Tom Cruise's presence is undeniable. He's not just the star, he's the engine. He's involved in everything: pacing, logistics, performance, problem solving. For many productions, that intensity is fuel. Schedules tighten, focus sharpens, momentum builds, things get done. But intensity cuts both ways. Not everyone thrives under constant scrutiny. When leadership feels omnipresent, mistakes feel louder, hesitation feels dangerous. During difficult shoots, long nights, physical exhaustion, emotional strain, pressure compounds quickly. Fatigue mixes with expectation, and when solutions feel imposed rather than explored, something subtle begins to erode: confidence. Some actors have described moments where creativity narrowed, where instinct gave way to calculation, not because they lacked talent, but because the environment demanded precision over exploration. Performance became about survival, about not slowing the machine down, about staying aligned with a singular vision rather than discovering something new. These moments don't make headlines, they don't come with accusations or confrontations. They live quietly in memory, in conversations years later, in pauses before answering certain questions. And when similar experiences surface across different sets, they begin to form a pattern. That pattern doesn't erase brilliance. Tom Cruise's leadership has produced extraordinary results, but it suggests something more complex beneath the success, a dynamic where excellence and intimidation exist side by side, where inspiration pushes some people higher, while others shrink just enough to stay safe. Power, after all, doesn't need to be cruel to be overwhelming. Belief is a powerful force. It gives structure, purpose, certainty. And when belief is paired with fame, it becomes influence. Tom Cruise's commitment to his worldview isn't casual or private, it's foundational. For years, it shaped how he lived, how he worked, and how environments around him were structured. Supporters describe clarity, discipline, direction. Critics describe something else, rigidity, a system where disagreement isn't welcomed and questioning feels like betrayal. Former insiders have spoken about environments where loyalty is rewarded and doubt is quietly punished, where alignment brings opportunity and distance brings consequences. Whether these accounts are exaggerated or precise, they share a consistent theme: authority without challenge. And history tells us that unchecked authority doesn't need bad intentions to cause harm, it only needs certainty. When someone believes completely and is rarely questioned, their perspective becomes the standard by default. In creative spaces, that dynamic is dangerous. Art requires friction, growth needs disagreement. When belief systems become institutional, nuance disappears, conversations narrow, people self-censor, not because they fear punishment, but because they sense resistance isn't worth the cost. What makes this complicated is sincerity. There's no performance here, no visible manipulation. The belief is real, and that's what makes it powerful. But sincerity doesn't guarantee safety, it just makes authority feel justified. Over time, environments like this don't collapse loudly, they quietly reshape behavior. People adapt, they align, or they leave. And what remains is a structure that feels stable, but carries invisible damage beneath its certainty. Hollywood rivalries rarely look like conflict. They look polite, cordial, carefully managed. Smiles at award shows, compliments in interviews, applause that lasts exactly as long as it's expected to. But beneath the surface, tension accumulates. Within shared belief systems, competition intensifies. Favor becomes currency, recognition becomes power. When one person rises higher, others don't just feel overshadowed, they feel displaced. In spaces where alignment matters, status isn't just about talent, it's about proximity, trust, approval. Stories circulate quietly, missed events, invitations that never arrive, meetings that happen without certain names in the room. No public fallout, no visible hostility, just distance. And distance, when unexplained, breeds resentment. Officially, nothing is wrong. No one confirms conflict. No bridges appear burned. But unofficially, everything feels strained. Conversations grow shorter. Praise sounds rehearsed. Enthusiasm cools. These rivalries don't explode, they freeze. And frozen tension is far more enduring than open conflict. Because frozen tension has no resolution, no apology, no closure. It simply exists, preserved beneath professionalism. Years can pass without it thawing. Careers continue, smiles remain, but the absence is felt. What makes these rivalries powerful is silence. Silence protects reputations. Silence maintains order. But silence also allows resentment to harden. And in an industry built on image, the most damaging conflicts are the ones that never give anyone a chance to speak honestly. For the women closest to Tom Cruise, relationships didn't unravel slowly, they ended abruptly, with speed, with silence. No long public explanations, no gradual separation. One day partnership, the next distance. For some, the shock was more destabilizing than the breakup itself. Professional success continued, careers advanced, public images remained polished, but privately, something fractured. Moments that should have felt triumphant, premieres, accolades, career milestones, arrived without shared celebration. Achievements were experienced alone, and only in hindsight did the personal cost become fully visible. In certain cases, separation wasn't just emotional, it was structural. Systems surrounding Cruise didn't dissolve when relationships ended, they lingered. Access narrowed, communication became indirect. For some women, leaving wasn't simply about walking away from a marriage, it meant navigating power, influence, and environments that didn't belong to them. Control didn't always end with intimacy. Boundaries blurred, independence required planning, distance required discretion, and safety, emotional or otherwise, required courage. These weren't dramatic exits, they were careful ones, quiet ones, designed to minimize fallout rather than provoke it. These stories aren't about villainy or innocence, they're about imbalance, about what happens when one person's gravity reshapes everything around them. Love under those conditions doesn't always fail loudly, sometimes it disappears. And the scars it leaves aren't visible on headlines, they live in recovery, in rebuilding identity after proximity to power. Success doesn't soften endings, it often accelerates them. And for those left behind, the silence afterward can be the hardest part to survive. Tom Cruise will be remembered as one of the most successful actors in history. That fact is unshakable. The box office numbers, the franchises, the longevity, the physical commitment. Few careers rival his. But legacies aren't built on achievements alone. They're shaped by patterns. They're shaped by how power is used, by how collaboration feels, by what people carry with them after the work ends. And this is where Cruise's legacy becomes complex. Admiration exists deeply, so does unease. Discipline sits beside rigidity, inspiration alongside fear. His presence has elevated productions and compressed others. His leadership has driven excellence and demanded conformity. Both can be true at once. Hollywood often avoids this kind of truth because it's uncomfortable. It prefers simple narratives, genius or villain, icon or cautionary tale. But real greatness is rarely clean. It leaves contradictions behind. And those contradictions don't cancel success, they define it. Cruise's story isn't about denying impact, it's about acknowledging cost. Because the measure of influence isn't just what's created, it's what's left behind. The silences, the strained relationships, the people who learned, adopted, endured, or quietly exited. In the end, the camera captures only part of the story. The rest lives off-screen, in memory, in experience, in conversations that never make it into documentaries or press tours. Long after the lights turn off, those stories remain. And maybe that's the truth Hollywood avoids most. Greatness doesn't require kindness, but it's remembered by it.